speaking loudly. I try not to. Right, so I'm Kevin, and I'm a graphic designer. These are things you guys already know. I am a freelance graphic designer. I've been freelancing since here. This is my infographic, my career at a glance. So I put it up there as my starting screen because there's a lot of information there to take in, and I thought maybe you guys might want to study it. Probably not, but so anyways, I figured that since I'm coming here to talk to you guys about how to find your niches, I should share with you a little bit about how, sorry, I'm getting some feedback, about how I found my niche and what my career path looked like. So, yeah, thanks.
No problem.
So yeah, I started back in 1997 as in a newspaper advertising art department. It wasn't glorious work. You know what, before I get started, I just kind of want to take a quick poll of the room here. How many of you are graphic designers? Okay, like 3 of you, awesome. So how many of you are interested in freelancing? Okay, how many of you have been doing what you do for 3 years or less? 3 years or more? Okay. Yeah, I'm just curious. It's good for me to know who I'm talking to, so it's good to know. So yeah, I started back in newspaper doing ads, but in school I always wanted to get into interactive design and development. That's sort of where I saw my my niche from early on, and so I decided to change. Well, I had an opportunity at that newspaper. They opened up what was called the Internet department at the time. I did a brief stint at FYI Winnipeg. I don't know, does anybody remember FYI Winnipeg by chance? You shouldn't. I'm not going to go too close to that thing, I guess. Is that the key? That's the key, okay. It's like screaming at me. So FYI Winnipeg was this awful initiative that was undertaken by the Winnipeg Sun to sort of keep people, informed about what was happening in Winnipeg and what was exciting. They adopted it from, I don't know, some FYI Toronto, which it worked in Toronto. It didn't work in Winnipeg for some reason. So I went over that, and it failed miserably. So they threw me back into the advertising art department, and I was really unhappy with that. So I was looking for other opportunities. And I ended up taking a job with a local web agency, a smaller web agency here in Winnipeg, downtown, the Exchange District. And I thought this was going to be my dream finally fulfilled. Turns out, we had some incompatibilities. It wasn't what I imagined. It wasn't what I felt like working in a design studio should feel like. So I had this really naive junior designer moment where I was like, you know what, if these idiots can run a business, I can run a business. So I went freelance for brief. You guys can't really see it. It's in really light gray there, but that was brief. It says brief freelance stint #1. So that was around 2002. That lasted about a year, and then I kept my eyes open. So back when I was in school, I had the pleasure of hearing a veteran designer by the name of Rob Peters speak in my class. He worked for an agency, a small boutique firm called Circle Design. Some of you may have heard of them. Some of you may have heard that now they're shutting down while they're merging with Tetro. I believe Rob is deciding he's after, I don't know, 500 years as a graphic designer, he's just going to retire now. He's a very wise man. So anyways, they were looking for a production designer. Not something that I would jump at today, but it was Circle. And I thought, you know what, I am going to take a shot at this. So I applied, and I was thrilled to actually get an interview. And so I came in, I met Rob, we talked, we really hit it off. he gave me this sort of really polite nod towards my portfolio, which was kind of to say like, okay, there's some work that needs to be done here, but I guess he saw potential in me, which is fantastic, and he decided to take me on to help them, and I worked there for 5 years, and that experience made me the designer that I am today, and I would never go back. However, as you can see here, boutique, I was concentrating mostly on graphic identities, and I learned a lot about branding, about companies, how they work, and I was doing a lot of design in print, and which was awesome. Like, there was some really great things that I learned. I learned packaging design. I learned a lot about different printing techniques like flexography and offset and embossing and debossing and foiling and really cool stuff. Specking paper, which is, I still love to spec paper nowadays. But like I said, originally I wanted to be a new media designer. I wanted to be in the interactive field. So after 5 years, after I gleaned, I think, enough of Rob's wisdom, I decided to keep my eyes open for another job that was going to get me back into focusing on web design. So I ended up at another larger interactive agency in the city here, and that was just an awful experience. That was like cold water being splashed on my face. It was like it was not at all what I expected. Oil and water, and we all decided to politely part ways, I think 6 months later. and that was the beginning of brief freelance stint number 2. So I said, okay, well, you know what, forget it. I'm just gonna see if I can make a go of this freelance thing again. That lasted about 6 months as well, and then I got a call from a friend and colleague, and at the time, the man who would prove to be my future creative director, Oliver Oiki, who's working at ManLab. He said, I want to introduce you to Dan Choi. We were looking for another designer to help us, somebody with some senior design experience to help us pick up the slack, add some expertise. So I came in, we hit it off. Oliver was one of the best creative directors that I worked with. We had a good time working at ManLab, but unfortunately, after about 3 years working at ManLab, they were forced to close their doors, I guess. What ended up happening, back in early 2000, a little thing called 9/11, right? And a lot of people, they really scaled back their marketing budgets, and that may seem like a lot of time, to be on a downward spiral, but I think that sort of economic impact that happened to a lot of people during 9/11 ended up taking its toll, and some businesses never recovered the client books that they had previously. So, well, that's my theory about what happened to ManLab, anyways. And they decided to close their door, and I moved on. And then I said, now's the time. I'm really going to make a go of this freelance thing. And that happened 2011. That's what I've been doing ever since. So unless somebody has a job offer for me. No? Okay. So, no, I'm kidding. I love what I'm doing now. The timing was right. Somebody asked me just before the talk started about, how do you know when you should be going off on your own? And I think a lot of it is you go by feel, So when you've learned enough, you feel like you've worked for bosses who've taught you everything that they can about how to ruin a business, or how to make a business very good. You get a sense of comfort when you worked with enough clients. You feel like you can work with clients on your own. So that's how I got to where I am today. So sorry, this is a really dark slide. They'll get brighter, trust me. So obviously I did a lot of moving around, right? That's one thing that you'll notice back there. And I think there's a reason for that. And it was because my values, what I valued, what I saw as an ideal work culture, ideal processes for developing design, how my coworkers should be interacting with me, how I should be interacting with them, everything about the experience of working with people and doing the job that you do, that you love to do, it just wasn't fitting with a lot of these experiences. It wasn't aligning with what I considered my values of what those things should be. So I continued to move on, and obviously a lot of you will probably do the same thing. Where did my values come from? Well, early on, even back when I was at the newspaper, I was poring through every single issue of Communication Arts magazine. And I don't know, how many people are familiar with CA? The graphic designers, of course. So it's this, essentially anybody in the communication arts field who is doing incredible work will submit their work to Communication Arts, or Communication Arts will seek them out and they'll ask them, you know, what was the rationale? How did you come up with this solution? They want to know everything about, you know, how did you arrive at the solution? And more than that, what's your company culture and how is your office set up? You know, that it's everything that epitomized what a design studio should be to me. And that had always been, it always has been in the back of my mind ever since. And the newspaper wasn't this, you know, it wasn't what this magazine was defining, obviously. The other agencies I worked at, they weren't meeting that expectation at all. So that's where my values came from. That's well, not solely, but that was a big part of shaping me. So, I mean, there's one thing that I would recommend. It's like, you know, do your research, read blogs, read magazines, industry magazines, and try to define what your values are for you. Like, how do you envision yourself working with a group? How do you envision yourself contributing to that group? It's really important to visualize the future. You know, there have been a lot of studies done on visualization, and not just for sports, right? Visualizing the end goal. But if you can use visualization for your own career, it's going to do wonders for you. So that's how I came across my values. So now I wanted to address this. I read this quote on somebody's blog recently, and it was a student writing to a veteran designer asking her, you know, whether or not this was true. And like her, I'm going to call bullshit on this because it's totally not true. It can be, but it can be. And that's sort of a warning. It's a trap, right? You can make your first job define you if that's what you choose. Sometimes that can be for good. Sometimes not so much. But if people are telling you this, you know, and if you're just getting started, then, you know, you don't have to believe it. So, case in point, this is one of the first advertisements that I designed when I was at the advertising art department. That is awful. That is just awful. I mean, this is for, you can't really see it, but it's Joseph & Co. for hair, right? Just in case you were wondering. That's we love to cut a rug. I thought of that. Yeah? Isn't that clever? It's just terrible. And I mean, not to mention, I'm showing like a pair of paper scissors, right? They're not like even stylus scissors. They're like, whatever. So I just threw together this, you know, quote unquote logo. And this company, they actually adopted this and they put it on their sign for like a decade, down McPhillips, and it was like they're mocking me for like, you know, most of my career every time I would pass by. So that's where I came from. This is kind of what I'm working. It doesn't give you the full picture of the project, but this is the cross section of. It's a paper sculpture that represents a cross section of a 400-foot steel wall that I helped to design with architects and landscape architects. The dots that you see there, those represent what's going to be probably, I'd say, like one of the largest, if not the largest, LED screen in all of Canada. This is going to be an interactive park. The wall illustrations, it's a technique that I developed with the architect, which uses layering steel And what it is essentially 400 feet that, that tells the story about Manitoba's history, right? And it's a very cool project. That's only one part of it. I've also worked with them on tons of different aspects of this project. It's going to be an interactive park, right? So the wall will hopefully react to people's visit. You'll be able to submit your own work that will be shown on the LED wall if you want to. There will be soundscapes in there. There will be augmented reality stations throughout. There's going to be an interpretive center with touch screens. So it's a pretty big project. It's an awesome project, and it's a world apart from Joseph & Co. for hair, right? So if you've ever fallen into the trap or ever felt like, you know, your first job is going to define who you are, I'm hoping that this proves otherwise. So that said, with those things in mind, I figured what I'll do is I'm going to run through a list of pros and cons about working in different environments, right? So if you're working, if you want to work, well, to help you sort of figure with your own values in mind, right? After we had that conversation, to help you sort of figure out where do my values fit? Do I want to work as an in-house? Do I want to work in a large agency, or do I want to work in a boutique, right? So I'm going to give you my rundown, my pros and cons, what my experience has taught me working in all those different environments, and then you guys can sort of decide for yourselves. So start with in-house design. So what is an in-house designer, first of all? I mean, you guys know, right? In-house corporate, yeah. You know, it's working for a larger company who has their own design department. Canadian Tire has their own in-house design department. Starbucks has one. Nike has one. Princess Auto has one, right? So there's that. It's that kind of. It's like essentially it's a dedicated brand. It's a company large enough to have their own design department. That's one way of defining it. I have another one, but I'll mention it later. So working in a newspaper was working in-house for me. So what are some of the pros? Well, direct client relationship. I'm gonna stress this thing about client relationships a few times. So having a direct client relationship to me is something that's really important. Being able to actually talk to your client as a designer, as whatever level of designer you are, it doesn't matter if you're a junior, intermediate, senior level designer. I think it's really important to be in client meetings and to actually talk directly to your clients, to understand what their pains are, to get a sense of their values, what they're trying to achieve with their businesses. To really be able to understand that stuff is super important. So obviously it's a direct client relationship. You only have one client, right? Often the pay is very good, right? So, and the benefits go along with that. This security is in quotes because I think security is what you make it, right? We've all seen the too big to fail bank scenario in the US. That can happen to anybody at any time. And also, I mean, if you're an asshole, they're going to fire you. So security is what it is, right? Professional development, often they have big budgets for professional development, and the really unique thing that I've found about in-house design studios is that they'll pay for almost anything. Like if you want to learn French, they will pay for you to learn French. If you decide you don't want to be a graphic designer anymore, they will pay for you to go to bookkeeping school so you can join their accounting department, right? They'll pay for almost anything. It depends. I mean, everything that I'm going to tell you here is sort of, it's not set in stone, obviously, right? So some places are obviously different from others. These are just my experiences and experiences from other designers that I've talked to who've had, you know, worked in similar environments. Reinvention, or sorry, I was at trust. Trust is, it's great because obviously developing trust with a client is a really important thing. You have one client, you develop that trust. They learn to trust you. And once you have that trust, you can get away with almost anything. You know, they loosen the reins a little bit. Routine, some people really like that. You know, there's security in routine. Reinvention, that one I really wanted to stress because occasionally these big companies will reinvent themselves. And if you're in the design department of a company when they're reinventing themselves, it can be a really exciting time. That's when you can do some really interesting work for them. But I won't lie, probably 80 to 90% of the time they shop out that stuff to other agencies. So you will sometimes end up just cleaning up the scraps. But I'm really selling this, right? Social groups, yeah, these are still pros, in case you guys are wondering. The social groups, great staff parties. That's one thing about working in an in-house department. There's a lot of people. Like, we're talking about companies that are, 100, 200 people strong, right? So you get to know people in all kinds of different departments, doing all kinds of different things. You see them every day. You develop relationships, which are awesome, right? That's definitely a huge pro. Now, I put these last three in here, which may seem a little out of place after what I just talked about: innovative, challenging, creative, right? But I'm talking, this is like the other type of in-house design work. And I kind of qualify, you almost can't even qualify it as in-house design work because it's almost too good for that. But companies like Shopify, right? There was a Shopify in Winnipeg. I think they still have. They had Chris Lobe. He's one of the co-founders of Secret Handshake. I think he's moved on to Ottawa now to work for Shopify there. Man, you talk to that guy about Shopify and he just would not shut up. He loved it, and for good reasons. Like, all the things that he would tell me about it, like the culture that they developed, the challenges that the people were given, like the way they, they had the professional development budgets. They were extremely supportive of people, but they're small. They're, relatively speaking, small. They're huge now. They're doing extremely well, but in small pockets in every city, they had these really tight knit, this amazing culture inside. So if you can get in on the ground floor with a software startup or a startup in general, you're kind of all working together to make this thing work. And I think that can be a really interesting form of in-house design, right? So that's something to keep in mind as well. So what are some of the cons? Can you guys see this okay? It's a little bit dark, right? But really bad color choice. Bad designer. So obviously there's only one client, right? That's kind of a con. So with that, there's stagnation. There are opportunities to rise in the ranks, but those opportunities can be slow. Like the growth within that experience can be very slow. More specialization. What I mean by that is essentially you're not going to be doing a lot of different things. Often in an in-house design department, you have one specific job to do, and you don't get to dabble in other things. So if you are a graphic designer who likes a little bit of front-end development, often you're not going to get that opportunity. You're just going to be working in Photoshop and doing that one thing. Okay, so that can be a bit of a bummer for some people. Office politics, working with HR departments, working with the IT department. Oh my God, those are some of my worst memories of working in-house, where you've got, if you've got a complaint or you want to raise, you've got to go talk to some HR person who has no idea what you do. They don't understand what you bring to the table, or what a creative person needs, or what a creative office should look like or feel like. So that can be really weird. And then the IT departments in big companies, often getting the latest equipment, getting fonts bought or installed, new software upgraded, that can be a real pain in the ass with these big companies, because everything's got to go through IT, and it's a really cumbersome sort of experience. So, and of course, less flexibility in your hours too. They expect you to be there 9 to 5. You're just like everybody else, right? It's not like other creative fields. So after my in-house experience, right, I went to a boutique. I went to a small agency and then to a boutique. So what is a boutique studio? They're generally smaller, small being 5, 20, 25, 30. I'd say no more than no more than 20 usually, smaller firms. But that's not really what defines them. It's more the fact that they do such unique work. They're so highly sought after that they can often pick and choose their own clients, right? They have opportunities to say, no, I don't need your work, or you know what, my values don't align with yours, and I don't like your product, so I'm not going to be able to do good work for you, so you should go to these guys instead, right? Anybody who's in a position to do that it's kind of a boutique position, right? So that's how I define boutique studio. Lots of pros though. Direct client contact, right? When I worked in a boutique, I was able to talk to my clients. I was able to hear their stories, talk to them about their strategies, about what their competitors were doing. I got a sense of how business actually worked because I could talk to my clients, and I understood where I needed to come in and add value for them. Higher diversity in clients. So, I mean, obviously that's going to be different from working in-house, but it's also different from working in an agency where you get to work with a lot of nonprofits. A lot of small to medium-sized enterprises can't afford to hire big agencies, so they go to the boutiques because their rates can be a little bit more reasonable. And I think those are actually really great clients to work with because they are in a unique position where they have to apply these constraints that some other companies don't have to apply. It's budgetary constraints, and sometimes constraints can be really good for your creativity. Like, to work within constraints is a good thing, but that's on the side. So strategic skill development. Now that's different. Strategy, or being a strategic designer, that's like a term that a lot of designers throw around a lot, but not a lot of designers really know what it means. Like, does anybody have a definition for strategy? I'd really like to hear what somebody else's definition for strategy. Anybody want to take a stab at it? Strategy, it's not that hard, right? No? See, okay, what is it? An efficient way to do something. Oh, that's not bad. Plan of action, right? That's good. Yeah. Sorry, say that again. Your pipeline for your project, or sort of... Right. So, like, you got something, you're planning ahead for something. You're being more proactive. Right. I mean, those are all typical, but really, I mean, if you want to go to, I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't know it off by heart, but there's a Harvard School of Business definition for strategy. And it's essentially, it's doing things distinctly different from your rivals. Right? That's the Harvard School of Business, essentially the Harvard School of Business definition for what strategy is. Choosing to do things distinctly different from rivals, right? So if you think about that, right, like, that means you understand what your rivals are doing, right? You have to know what they're doing. And that also means that you need to know what you want to achieve, right? And that you're trying to achieve the exact same thing, because otherwise they wouldn't be a rival, right? So it requires a lot of information, requires a lot of creativity. So that's what being a strategic designer is all about. And unless you have direct client contact, it's really hard to be a good strategic designer. So something to keep in mind. Close-knit teams. Because they're such small environments, the teams can become very close-knit, almost like a family, very cliquey, which is, it's kind of awesome, maybe sometimes kind of bad, but that can also lead to a lot of skill overlap, which is great. So again, going back to the analogy, if you're a graphic designer who wants to do some front-end development, you'll likely have opportunities to do that in a boutique. If you want to do a little bit of creative writing, there may be some room for you to do that there too, with a very tight leash. So that's another great thing about working in a boutique. A lot of larger agencies see your experience in a boutique as very valuable, right? Because they know you've had that client contact. You know that greater access to the principal, which is the next point, and you've had that. And this is kind of a huge point. when you're working at an in-house design firm, you're not going to be talking to the CEO on a regular basis. That just doesn't happen. When you're working in a larger agency, that's probably not going to happen either. Even medium-sized agencies, it just doesn't happen, right? And there's something that happens. There's a sort of knowledge that just gets sort of transferred to you when you can see the look in the principal's eye, like the person who's running that company every single day. You feel their pain when the company's not doing well. You know, you feel their excitement when you land a big client, right? When you have direct access to the principal and you talk to him every day and you have an opportunity to sort of say, you have that transparency with them, like, you know, how's the business, how are we doing? You care about that company a lot more and you take ownership of the company, right? That is a huge point. And once you've learned to take ownership of your job, of the company, you become a far more valuable person. And that's why a lot of larger agencies see any experience that you've had in a boutique agency as very, very valuable. And a lot of these boutique companies will give you flexibility to work from home, work from a coffee shop, wherever you're most comfortable, whenever you want to work. That's not always true, but it can be true sometimes. So what are the cons? Well, it's a lot harder to get a job at a boutique studio, unfortunately. After I went off on telling you guys how awesome it is, it's really hard to actually land those jobs because they are small and they don't have a lot of spaces all the time. And when they are hiring, often they're looking for somebody very specific. They need you to fit into that culture, right? That's the point that I'm making later on. There are more things to do. And by that, it's not the skill overlap thing. It's like there usually isn't a house or a cleaning staff, you know. There's usually not copywriters, you know. So you're gonna have to wash dishes. You're gonna have to empty your own garbage, maybe, you know, if you're kind of not cool with that. I don't see it as a bad thing, honestly, but I put it in the con column just because I think some people may be put off by that. You're not always going to have somebody to answer the phone for you. You might have to answer your own phone, you know, say hi. No, you got me directly. That's me, right? So that's, I mean, you know, and that actually can be kind of a pain in the ass too when you have to answer your own phone, right? Because like when you're working, you really get into it. You, like, I mean, as a designer, you really got to focus in. And then somebody calls you, it's like, you know, it just snaps you right out of it. So that can be a bad thing, I guess. I don't know. I'm really reaching for bad things, I think. But competing for vacation time, that can happen. I worked recently as a fill-in for a boutique studio here in town. It had one designer, tons of work. He was getting married, so he was allowed to go on vacation. I guess he was gone for a month, so I filled in for him for a month. And but the pressure, right, to have to compete for that vacation time is like, it's huge. Smaller professional development budgets, for sure. They're not going to just fork out the money for anything you want to do. The cultures can be very sensitive, right? Like I said, it's a tight-knit group, right? So it can be a little bit cliquey. And if you don't fit in, it may not be a great experience for you, you know, going to work every day until you learn to fit in and people learn to trust you. Earning that trust with your coworkers can be a lot harder in those tight-knit groups, right? So it's a type of office politics that's a little bit different. And you know, as is the case with pretty much anything else other than like a large company as an in-house designer, you know, work-life balance, long hours can be a problem, right? That's just something that plagues the industry, unfortunately. So that's that. So now let's talk about working for an agency. I've worked for agencies, small, large. What is an agency? It's essentially a broker, somebody who brokers a relationship with a client. They develop a relationship. Okay, I'll go through this really quick. So if you develop an ongoing relationship with a company, usually like an advertising agency, you sign clients. That's how people define an agency. So Pros, larger clients. I've worked with larger clients like Del Monte and, or a division of Del Monte, Contadina Tomatoes and Expedia and Cabela's, right? By working at larger agencies. And that sounds really impressive, right? But they're sometimes the worst clients to work for. But that can be a con if what you're looking for is to have that on your resume, right? Some strategic skill development, so you will get a little bit of direct client contact, but not as much. Usually the creative director or art director or in the worst cases, an account manager will be the one who has direct client contact, and they'll be the one who tells you what the client wants, and so you have to sort of try to glean the information out of them. And so I can't stand those arrangements, but that's what ends up happening. The pay is often much better than a boutique, usually as good as an in-house. The benefits are usually fantastic. Professional development, of course, they'll take you to conferences, they'll take you, they'll pay for you to learn JavaScript or PHP or whatever you want to learn. Water cooler talk, so that's just the same as the in-house, good, social environment and opportunities to ascend. So if you stick with an agency and if you really like the agency lifestyle, you can go from a junior to a senior to an art director to a creative director to sometimes even into an executive management if you stick with that agency long enough and you understand how the business works and you get it. If you just really thrive in the agency environment, there's a lot of opportunity to rise through the ranks, as long as you step on other people's throats and pee in their coffee. So don't do that, that's gross. So what are some of the cons, right? Little to no client contact, like I said. Slow growth, even though there's an opportunity to ascend, sometimes it can take a long time, but also just because of the next point, there's more specialization. It's like the in-house, you're usually hired on to do one specific thing, right? So you're not going to get a lot of skill overlap, which means that your professional or personal growth might be a little bit slower. You really got to work harder to get that skill overlap. They don't want you to fall outside of their very stringent processes, and it's harder to break their processes because there's a lot of layers on top. When I was working at that larger agency that didn't quite work out for me, I had this sort of analogy that I used to share with some of the other designers, because we all sort of felt this oppression, right? Like when I was working in a boutique, you get to feel things hands-on, like everything is very tactile. Being able to deal with the client directly, there's something a lot more tactile about it. But when you're working in an agency, it's like kind of being this big robot, I don't know, you guys are like a Power Rangers robot thing, like where you're inside this massive machine that you have to control, and you have to figure out how to get the claw over there to grab that thing, and it's just there's all these layers of politics and people to go through, and and asses to kiss sometimes, right? So it can be a little bit much to take. It can be a real pressure cooker because you don't have that direct, again, like I said, I'm going to stress the direct client contact. You don't have that direct client contact, so you can't necessarily say to them, okay, well, you're telling me that you need this thing by this time. Why? Can we not push that back? I don't think I'm there, right? Like I've had conversations with clients, directly with my clients, where I've said, they said, we really need this by this time, so why don't we reevaluate next week? And I sit down with them, and the day's coming up, and I've been agonizing over something, and the deadline's coming up, and I just call them up, and I say, listen, I don't think we're there. I think I need a couple more days, or why don't I come by and I'll just show you what I've got. And I don't think it's there. Let's work it out together, right? You can never do that at a big agency, right? I mean, maybe you should never say never, but I just can't see that happening. And one of the reasons why the deadlines are so stringent is because like I said, you've got creative directors and you've got account managers who are opposing these deadlines. They're the ones that are saying to the client, we'll have it to you by this time. So if you screw up that deadline, they're the ones who look bad, right? So it's a lot harder for you to be flexible with deadlines, which means often you will end up working long hours to meet that deadline because large agencies are really, really busy. So you could be working on one crazy deadline and then have another one the next day, which means I'm here till 5 and now I got to work till midnight, 1, 2 o'clock this morning so that I can meet the deadline tomorrow as well. That happens. That's happened to me a couple times. And that's generally, what happens in large agencies. So office politics, again, HR departments, IT departments, the same gripe there. Less flexibility in the hours as well, right? Again, that one's not always true with agencies. Some of them actually can be pretty cool about that, depending on who you're talking to. So that's working in an agency. So anyways, those are all the options. I figured this would probably be a good time to pause, right? And just sort of consider, how your values align with my opinions on all those situations. Then we'll come back. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Is that better? It's not in your guys' face anymore. Wow. I feel like it's louder now. Is it? Or is it just because it's been raised up?
It's because you just brought that much more energy.
Yeah.
It's ramping up.
I feel that.
All right.
Okay, so all that stuff that I talked about before the break was kind of a preamble to, how I came to become a freelancer. So I figured I should talk about that next. Talk about being in freelance. Freelance design. I'd like to say that I'm a hired gun. I'm a creative director for hire, right? So people hire me now to come in. I'm a fixer. I come in to fix things, right? That's not true. I actually just, I just take over for people. Like the guy who went on vacation for his wedding. No, I do a lot of my own client work now, which is great. I do fill in when larger agencies have a lot of overlap. So I've done some freelance work for the IC group. I've been talking to companies like ThinkShift, who have a need to outsource. Tactica is one of the companies I've worked for. So there's that niche where you can actually, as a freelance, essentially they will bring you in for a temporary amount of time, and if you choose to, you can leave. Sometimes they really try to suck you in because they need the help, but I choose to remain independent. And of course, there's also selling yourself and getting your own client work, like the professional you saw in that picture. So, what are some of the cliche? It's kind of tinny, right?
Yeah,
it's like okay, thanks. What are some of the cliche pros to working? Some of the things you probably have all heard about working for yourself. Now, every single one of these, like I really hesitate to even call it pros and cons in freelance. Like I don't know. They're all what you make them, right? So work when you're most productive. Sure, yeah, that's a good one. That's a good pro. Sometimes you have to just work though, right? Work from home, yeah, it's kind of a pro, right? A lot of people love that. It's kind of like living the dream, being able to work from home. No ceiling on your income. There is no end to how much money you make. That is true. It's true, but it's a lot harder to. Yeah, exactly. If you don't sleep, yeah, and you really got to prove yourself, and there's also no bottom on what you can make either, right? So let's just put it that way. All these things that are up here, like that sound like they're really good, the antithesis of them is also true. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Choose your own clients. Sometimes, depends on how busy you are, depends on what you want to do. Be your own boss. That is absolutely true. You are your own boss until you get a client, then they're your boss. So, the cons. It is lonely working from home, and you will discover that if you ever work from home for long periods of time. And because it's lonely, it can be hard to focus. Sometimes you'd rather just watch TV or catch up on Breaking Bad. You can what I call binge watch past seasons of Game of Thrones, and you're your own boss. You can do whatever you want, right? You also got to pay the bills. It's stressful. That's the part of working for yourself that can be, kind of stressful. Is the fact that it's stressful because it's risky, but there's also other things that you got to think about. Not only your designer, but you got to remember to make your CPP contributions. You got to remember to charge your GST. You got to remember to do your bookkeeping, right? You got to remember to track your expenses. That's not what you sign up for when you first become a graphic designer, right? And risk is really what you're comfortable. What are you comfortable shouldering, right? That you are the person who can determine risk. If next point, long stretches without income, if that sounds crappy to you, then that's risky. That's a risk. That's definitely a risk of going into business for yourself. because there will be long stretches without income. And it's not because you're not busy. It's not because you're not getting projects. It's because people just aren't paying you, right? People, you send out an invoice, there's no guarantee that you're going to get paid the next day, right? There's this term that some of you may have heard. It's called net 30. Does anybody know it? Show of hands, who knows what net 30 means? 30 days to get paid, right? That's sort of an industry standard. It's like, please pay me within 30 days, right? If you're Canadian, that's really what net 30 is. But 30 days very quickly stretches to 60 days, sometimes 90 days, right? Depending on how crappy your client is. So collecting sucks, right? It's really crappy. Like having to call, and it's not for everybody. You know, hi, it's been 30 days since I sent you that invoice. Do you think you'll be able to send me that check today? It's awkward. That's an awkward call to have, right? I'm pretty good at it now, right? There's a really great talk, if you guys ever have an opportunity. Mike Monteiro, it's called "Fuck You, Pay Me." It's very good. If you're okay with profanity, it's an excellent talk. You've seen that one. So these are some of the cons, right? These are real cons to going into business for yourself. So I don't recommend this for anybody who's never worked with a real client before. So if you're in school now, or if you have been in the industry for less than 3 years, less than a year, and you're not really working directly with clients, I don't recommend having that sort of, throw up your hands moment that I had if you're not satisfied with your job, right? Where I just said, you know what, forget this, I'm just going to do it on my own. Learning to work directly with clients is a skill that you need to develop. I mean, you know what, if you're really miserable and you want to chance it, go for it, right? If you can shoulder that risk, if you're okay with it, if you've got like a lot of savings and you don't mind buying groceries with credit cards, right? Then, then do it. But I would recommend getting some experience, a lot of experience under your belt before you decide to go off on your own and start your own business. Unless you want to do your own IP stuff too, right? There's always that. I mean, that's a different type of business altogether, different type of creative. Like, I mean, if you want to create templates for Theme Forest, or you want to do stock illustrations for iStock, that's one avenue. There's a whole other talk in that though, right? Where if you want to make money as a stock illustrator, you need to be like drawing multiple things a day and just throwing as much into iStock as you can before you're going to make money off of it. You need to have hundreds and hundreds of submissions before it becomes a living. Anyways, that's why I wouldn't recommend it for anybody who doesn't have a lot of experience. This is a really important thing to keep in mind. When you decide to go into business for yourself, you're a business person. You're no longer a designer. You own a business. So the busier you get, the less of what that thing is that you're going to be doing, where you should be anyways, because otherwise you're going to stagnate and you're not going to grow. You're going to lose money. So if what you want to do is design, in my case, if what you want to do is actually work on designs, don't go into business for yourself, right? Because you're going to do less and less of it as your popularity grows. You need to learn how to develop processes so that you can teach other people to do what you do. You need to focus on steering the ship. Where is the next opportunity? How do I get more business in? Sure, we're busy for the next 3 months, but what are we going to do 3 months after that, right? Those are the things that you're going to be concerned about. Bookkeeping, like I said, tracking your expenses, timekeeping, project management. So eventually you'll be hiring people, hopefully you'll be hiring people to do that stuff for you, but all the while you'll be doing less and less of what you love to do. Or you should be doing less and less of what you love to do. But maybe you'll love running a business, right? Which I actually really love the business side of things. I've learned to love it anyways. It's an amazing challenge. And with that, you're going to be developing a whole new set of skills, right? So that's sort of it in a nutshell. You're going to be learning to be a business person from here on in. So there's not much else to becoming a freelance than that. I would love to talk to you guys if anybody has questions that pertain to your particular situations. We can talk about that afterwards. But what I'm going to talk about now is essentially all the things that are true about the design industry. Sort of they're universal truths, things that you can take to the bank for any single situation you're in the creative industry. All right, and I'm hoping that these will be Kevin's ninja tips, right? So, number one, don't be an asshole. Right? This is kind of obvious. It seems obvious, right? But like, what do I mean by this? Right? Like it's not like the obvious. Don't be an asshole. Be nice to everybody. Everybody knows you should be a good person. What I mean is that when you're looking for a job, when you're trying to sell to clients, when you're trying to network, you're going to build your reputation based on your character, not on your skill, right? Most employers, most business people, anybody who's in a position to hire or work with you will tell you 9 times out of 10 they will hire you for your character over your skill, right? So you give me a guy who is extremely talented versus a guy who makes me laugh in an interview, right? I'll take the guy who made me laugh every time, right? Because if I know that I'm going to work with this guy every day, I want to have a relationship with this guy, right? Because he was cool. This other guy, whatever, he didn't really, there wasn't much that stood out. He wasn't a bad guy, I didn't dislike him. He wasn't necessarily even an asshole. He was super talented. But, the guy who stands out is the guy who makes you laugh, the guy who you get along with, the guy who has the same sort of character values that you have, right? 9 times out of 10, you'll get hired for your character. So that's a universal truth, definitely. Clients are both the best and the worst part of your job. Clients are your job. That's really what it is, right? So if you haven't worked with a lot of clients, if you get a job in an agency or whatever, you may be tempted to complain about your clients. Oh, they're asking for another revision and blah, 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 blah. They're why you're making money, right? So suck it up, right? You're going to get good clients and you're going to get really bad clients, but the bad clients are going to make bad days bad for sure. They're going to make you want to sort of stay in bed and hide under the covers and I don't want to work on that project anymore. But the good clients are going to make you want to jump out of bed and go to work, right? And that's why you're going to love what you do, because you're going to meet clients that you appreciate what they do, you believe in what they do, you want to help them succeed, and you know how to help them succeed, right? And those are the clients that make your job. Either way, especially if you're in school still, this is something that you will learn very quickly once you start working, is that clients are the job, right? It's not just the skills that you've obtained. Embrace process. Again, when I was really naive at my first agency experience, I remember the controller, the new controller, the accountant who came in, he wanted to implement this time tracking software, and there was a lot of juniors in that department at the time, and I remember everybody just being like, oh, they can't put a leash on us like that. We can't just track our time. You can't just qualify what we do as, in blocks of time, right? Like, we just felt so constrained and so hard done by that. I live and die by my time tracking right now. Like the processes that you criticize in your everyday job, if you get a job at an agency or a boutique or whatever, any of the processes you end up criticizing, if you end up going to business for yourself, you will adopt them immediately. And you will learn very quickly to adopt those processes. But what else is really important about embracing process is knowing where you are, right? Along the way, like knowing that knowing that, this is how I engage clients, this is our next step, this is how we move into development, this is how we move into testing, this is how we move into, post-production support, right? Knowing where you are along the line gives you a sense of what I've done, where I'm going. I can communicate with my coworkers, I can communicate with my clients, I can let everybody know where I'm at, everybody's happy, everybody stays happy. Process is going to save your life. This is something I always try to keep in mind, especially when I'm employed. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time. Everybody wants to be a success, right? But what makes you successful is that people value you, is that you're adding value. If you're not adding value, then if you don't go to work and sit there and add value to your company, you're expendable. You're costing them money, right? And that's something you have to remember. So if you want to spend some time on Facebook, it's whatever, we all do it every now and then, that's fine. But if you're jaded and you're bored and that's why you're spending time on Facebook, then you know what, you're wasting somebody's money. So think about how can I add value to this company? How can I add value to the people who have chosen to employ me, right? That's why you're there. That's why they hired you in the first place. And if you're not valuable, you're expendable. If you are valuable, you'll go far very quickly. And this is a design point, but I remember somebody called me really sappy early on in my career for saying this, for saying like that what makes designers unique is the fact that we're empathetic, right? Like I think we can understand other people's pain in successful designers anyways can understand other people's pain in ways that maybe regular people can't. I don't know. We want to help. If you want to help, if you're empathetic, you're really going to want to learn how to help people, and that helps them communicate. Like you're there to help them communicate. Like that's an extremely empathetic act, don't you think? Right? So practicing empathy and remembering that you're there to help somebody succeed, even if you don't even really like the person all that much, at first. If you can if you can be that guy who's like, okay, well, he's a real asshole, but I wonder why he is, I wonder what happened in his life. I wonder what's happening in his business, to make him act like this. What are his stresses? And you start, those are the gems. That's how you really get in there and find out how you can help somebody, right? And that's how you can turn really bad clients sometimes into really good clients, is because you're taking the time to understand them, even when at first you don't like them. I've had tons of relationships, working relationships with coworkers, with clients, who immediately, they just get my back up. I think like this is going to be an awful experience. But over time, I realized like, wow, you know what? This guy's actually really cool, or I really enjoy working with this person. And I've had the opposite happen as well, where it's like, oh, this is going to be awesome. And then after 6 months, it's like, I can't wait till this person is gone, But either way, if you have to try to figure out what is bothering people, where are their true problems, not just from a business perspective, but what keeps them up at night. And if you can solve that problem for somebody, you will be of value to them, of tremendous value to them. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about some bonus material here. This first one is very, very design related. If you want to get into design, if you've been educated in Manitoba, you don't know enough about typography. Typography is a skill that takes time to learn. It's a specialty, but knowing a little bit about why a font family was created, when it was created, for what purpose, really getting to know type, the curves, the nuance of what makes type beautiful. If you can really learn to love type, you're going to be a better designer. That's just a universal truth. Type is everything. Good type, understanding good spacing. I love this poster. Bad typography is everywhere. Good typography is invisible, right? Because if it's good, you don't see it. You don't pay attention to it. If it's bad, something about it turns you off. Sometimes you won't be able to put it into words, but typography, good typography, excellent typography skills is the key to being a good designer. And then learning to write, soft skills are super, super important. Does everybody know this book? You guys get this book? Have you heard of this title before? This is kind of a famous sentence. It's grammatical. It's meant to correct grammar, right? Notice the comma in red. I've already told you too much. If you don't understand why this is a famous grammatical sentence, then you need to read the book, okay? Let's just leave it at that. So, soft skills, right? Learning to communicate. Not only will that make you a better designer, it'll make you a better employee, it'll make you a better business person, it'll make you a better person in general. Learn to communicate, learn to speak to people, to express complex ideas, to write, to use proper grammar, to capitalize where you should be capitalizing, right? And to be able to put a period on things every now and then, put commas in the proper places. That is, you will be able to sell yourself like nobody else, right? Like if you can learn to write better than most millennials. Whoops, I just said that. So that's pretty much all I have to say. This is my last slide. This is some of my contact information if anybody wants to contact me for whatever reason. Just, disagree with me or to add some points, whatever you guys want to say. Does anybody want to talk about stuff? Clap first. Does anybody want to clap? Anybody have things they want to ask me or just comments?
I'd like to ask before the first question gets asked.
Yeah.
If you'd be so kind as to fill out the evaluation forms that you received today. They help us immensely.
Before you do that, I have prizes, so you know. I'm willing to give away. I'm willing to bribe people for good evaluations.
Yes, you'll get entered into the prize tonight.
Yeah.
One of the prizes if you fill out the evaluation form. But please do not take this as an indicator that you should not ask questions. In fact, we encourage you. Are there any immediate questions that anyone has right now that's been?
Anything about going into business, going freelance? Yeah.
Well, I guess one of the things that interested me in this workshop was the line here that says, finding what you love to do and how to make money from it.
Yeah.
So how did design is pretty wide?
Yeah.
Range of things. So what did you find out what you love?
Finding what I love to do was, one of those first slides that I put up was finding my passion, right? Everybody says find your passion, what you love, and finding what you value, I think, is sort of how I changed that, right? So you need to define what your values are, the types of people you want to work with, the types of environments you want to create, and within those environments you're going to thrive, and you'll learn, and you'll become an expert at what you do when you're thriving, right? And when you become an expert at what you do, that's how you make money off of it. If you want to go off on your own, there's a lot of components to being a successful business person. I don't know that I have all the answers to that. You need to learn how to sell. You need to learn how to maintain relationships, right? How to network.
Go to business school?
No. What was it? It was after my second freelance stint. I did a contract as an in-house for a little while. And then shortly after, I just decided that I wasn't going to do freelance anymore. I just needed to stop doing it because I wasn't making enough money, and I was going to start looking for a job. And I was feeling kind of defeated about it. And the owner of that company, they were called Tell Us About Us at the time. They recently sold to a company in Austin called Market Force. And now the guy who called me up after I said to him, I can't do this anymore. I'm not making enough money. He called me up and he said, you know what, good for you. Good for you for being honest, and good for you for failing, right? He said, you just got your MBA, you know? So just trying, like, I mentioned a book to somebody earlier. It's called The E-Myth. Do you guys know that one? Do you know that one? The E-Myth? Yeah. If you're planning to go into business for yourself, if you want to be a freelance, I recommend reading The E-Myth. It's essentially a business consultant who he's speaking to some lady. It's an anecdote about a lady who wants to open up her own pie shop, right? She makes great pies. Everybody tells her she should open up her own business, so she does. And then 2 years later, she's failing, so he kind of comes in and tells her why she's failing, right? It's a really great book to sort of give you a sense of how to build processes, what expectations you should have about being a business person, like essentially the fact that, you know, if you're a designer, you want to go into freelance, you'll be doing a lot less design the busier you get. So that's one of the principles.
I guess I probably asked the wrong, or worded it the wrong way, but I guess what was your skill that kind of turned into the monetizing factor, or what's your product that?
Well, what's my niche? Yeah. Well, yeah, graphic design is a big term, right? My niche is user experience design, and so user-centered design and graphic identities. That's my niche, and I just found that, you know, I do those well. I enjoy doing them, and I understand the processes that are involved in those things extremely well. So that's really my niche. Yeah. I think probably I didn't really want to focus too much on what my niche was, probably because I think what's more important is how everything around how I came to that point is more important to me, right? So I hope that was helpful for you guys too. Any other questions? Yeah.
Could you elaborate more on graphic identities?
Sure. What that is?
Yeah, how you define it.
Well, I like to use the term graphic identity because a lot of people use the term branding, and I think that's the wrong term. So a brand is essentially what people think about your product and or service, even when they're not using it, right? It's the experience that they've had with your company and whatever it is you're selling them that defines your brand. You know, everything from walking into the store, what does the store feel like? How does the staff treat you? You know, what does it feel like using that product? Does it feel like there's a quality there? The brand is a huge thing, right? So, and often people confuse brand with graphic identity. Graphic identity is essentially, it's the graphic representation of that brand, right? So it's developing the logo, choosing the colors, choosing typefaces, choosing type systems, and how they all come together to help people to create these signals that essentially act as doorways that trigger that sense of brand, right? So, wow, did that make any sense? Good. Good. Okay. That's a graphic identity. Yeah.
If you could elaborate on finding a client base and how, when you went into freelancing, you said you kind of failed a few times.
Sure.
Or not.
Yeah.
And maybe how that worked out for you now that you are a freelancer.
Yeah. Well, I think that when I first made an attempt, I was relying a lot on my friends to refer business to me, you know, to find people who were starting their own businesses. I was young. I didn't have a lot of sales experience and networking. I didn't understand soft sales, I think, more than anything, right? That's a that's a beast to take on, soft sales, right? So soft sale, I mean, if I can make it really brief, it's essentially it's selling without selling, right? It's just developing a relationship and just being there for somebody when they happen to need your services, you know. So networking is a big part of developing your soft sales skills, and not overimposing yourself on people, right? Not being too quick to try to close the deal, right? It's something that I didn't understand, you know, and I was constantly, I think I was just insecure because I didn't have a lot of experience selling. I didn't have a lot of experience with direct client relationships. So I was often overselling myself, you know, and overselling the solutions too. And it just wasn't working out. So now I just know better. Now it's sort of like, whatever, you want to work with me, let's work together. If not, fine. Let's not work together. You know, it's probably not worth anybody's time.
And so actually acquiring a client base, you were talking about selling yourself.
Yeah.
How would you do that?
How do you develop your client base? You do good work. That's pretty much it. Is you listen to what they're saying, you understand their problems, and you solve those problems for them. And if they feel like you've solved the problems and you didn't screw them, and you know, they're going to continue to work with you. That's your client base. You know?
Yeah, but you're saying like you're relying on your friends to refer you, but like
Yeah.
you're doing good work and you
Yeah.
kind of expect them to refer people.
Yeah.
How else would you?
Well, the biggest challenge for me was just getting them to work with me, right? And my first time around, like I said, I didn't really have a lot of the skills that I have now, right? I didn't develop a lot of the refinement, or I didn't have a lot of the processes in place, right? So it wasn't even just, you know, the acuity, like in how well graphically I could produce things. It was being able to communicate properly with clients, right? Being forthright with them. All those things that you have to learn to develop. I think it takes time to, you know, to develop those skills, and there's a huge I don't know, learning curve there. So was for me.
I just wanted to add something to that. Something that I think is sort of hidden from a lot of people is it takes years too. It's not like you snap your fingers and all of a sudden overnight
Yeah.
you're working for your friends and then you're working for huge clients.
Yeah.
It's like it's a slow burn, you know, and if you try to hit the gas too soon, you might just like burn out.
Yeah.
Right? You might burn up the car. And so you really like, at least in my experience, what I've learned is just, you know, it's not like a get rich quick kind of thing. It's a get rich slow, or not, or like make a decent salary.
Yeah.
You know?
Pay your bills eventually.
Yeah, pay your bills
So-
eventually slow. Like,
Yeah.
don't expect that you're going to come out of school and
Yeah.
be, you know, supporting yourself in a year or 2 years. Think maybe 10 years, or you know, in that kind of a time frame, right? You need
Yeah.
to, it really takes a long time,
Yeah.
especially if you
Good
come
point.
from doing
But there's some things, and Kevin, you told me about this even prior to the session today, that you can do to show off your expertise. And one of them is just by having a blog.
Yeah.
And keeping that up. Right?
Yeah, no, good point. Yeah. I mean, that's something that we talked about with the ACC students today, is learning to blog, blogging regularly. If you are working on personal projects, or even if you're trying to develop skills, you know, being really honest about what you're trying to develop, you know, where you're trying to go, and getting people to sort of, you know, opening up a dialogue, so that people kind of they mentor you through, right, those tough times. It can be really exposing. You can feel vulnerable by doing that, but that vulnerability really is endearing to a lot of people. So you shouldn't be shy about blogging, you know, and asking for help when you need it. I think it's a really good way to start your career as well.
Do we have any more questions before we get to the classes?
Yeah.
When you were first starting off in graphic designing, were you doing a little bit of freelance work before you got your first job in business?
No, not really. No, I went from school like straight into the newspaper. It was the first opportunity I had. Yeah, I tried doing a little bit of, you know, freelance stuff. I think when I was even at the newspaper. Now that I think about it, but yeah, it wasn't really. I didn't really make a go of it. So
Your portfolio is built off schoolwork?
it was mostly built off of schoolwork and sketches. Actually, they hired me because I could draw. That was important to them back then. So yeah, you had enough.
Or sales and marketing.
Yeah,
So you were a big graphic designer. How did you become
sales and marketing.
yeah.
Oh, I don't know if I am. I don't know. I actually work with I've started working with a marketing strategist now. He's very good at what he does, and he's been teaching me new stuff every day, which is fantastic. But what he does is he sells marketing strategies to people, and we combine our knowledge to offer an even better solution. So
Any key strategies that
for
work for you?
for marketing, social media, networking, like I'd say that's probably the two biggest things for me is developing relationships, lots of relationships, building your network out as much as possible, right? And you're going to get referrals. I think we were talking earlier about this during the break, but so I actually go to a lot of industry networking events, like Secret Handshake, for instance, and work that comes out of that is usually more like I'm busy, but I heard of this guy that this guy came to me, and I think you would probably be able to take this on. So it seems counterintuitive to network with other people in the same industry as you, or who are, I guess, essentially competing for the same business. But I think the industry that we're in, the creative industry, is really supportive of each other. You know, we take care of each other. I think that's what's really cool about this industry. It's not dog eat dog. So.
On the pavement and do some cold selling?
I did cold calling in if I had my infographic up there in brief freelance stint number 2. I really tried to make a go of that and did some cold calling. And cold calling doesn't work, as far as I'm concerned. Not for graphic design. No, it's going through the yellow pages, white pages, calling people up. So, do you need any graphic design today? Just, I don't know. There's something about it. It just doesn't. It's just same reason why graphic designers don't advertise. You know, advertising, unless you're Awesome Co. Advertising doesn't seem to, it doesn't seem to work for you, right? Like I don't know.
I guess you would only be trying to sell a prospect, but
Yeah.
do you have to ever try and sell yourself to a potential prospect?
No. No. And I think the reason is that people will only hire you when they really see a need for what you do, right? You just can't convince them, and you develop a feel for it eventually. You can tell based on once you start talking about what you do and what you've done for other people, whether or not they're really interested in what you could possibly do for them. You start to see that, and I think you develop a nose for, I'm wasting my time here, right? I'm not gonna sell this guy. That's a hard sell. Hard selling to me doesn't work. I don't know. I've never been a good hard seller, right? Some people can pull it off, but not me. Harvey Specter. I don't know. Anybody watch Suits? Anyways.
All right, let's get a round of applause for Kevin.
Thank you.